Send in the Dragon by Harlow Dayne. Realizing you're dead is a cornucopia of weird. Hovering above your own body opens a floodgate of thoughts and emotions. Some souls remember the big picture and move on immediately. Some remain earthbound due to unresolved issues, can't bring themselves to let go, or stay behind either to comfort or haunt the living. For me, there was no white light with smiling relatives. No one came to lead me home. After the rush of being incorporeal wore off, I knew I needed a plan. Walking through walls was a cheap thrill, but the prospect of wandering aimlessly for eternity was looming as inescapable as a massive twister bearing down on a farmhouse. The first thing that came to me was finding a psychic. I needed someone to talk to, someone that could hear me. You'd think one would be easy to find, but I had no phone to scroll social media platforms and knew many were blatant fakes. It may have been the case years ago, but homes with signs out front painted with big, gaudy eyes weren't easy to find these days. After a little scouring of abandoned locations, I left a few EVPs on the equipment of a paranormal team, hoping a good medium would be consulted. But the guys misinterpreted my words. Immediately, I was labeled a murdered spirit seeking justice by some of them, and others called me the freaking D word. Next, I checked out cemeteries. The truth is, these are some of the most peaceful places you can visit. What actually does remain behind of those interred is more like a hint of their essence. If you stand respectfully at graves and think of them with love, you might see a flower nod or hear a whisper of your name. A synchronistic butterfly might flutter past. It's also rare to encounter a lingering spirit inclined to answer questions about the great beyond. My hope began to wane. I needed an alternate method to communicate. I wasn't looking to scare the crap out of anyone, but I had read somewhere that since spirit energy could manipulate electronics, an open word program might work. I'm not proud of it, but I had to be something of a workplace voyeur to make the most of cubicles vacated during lunch hour. What I hadn't anticipated was that influencing a single key was as tough as brain surgery. I had to learn to relax and channel a boost of energy. Experimenting, I left a few choice words on a screen, but initially my person thought she had accidentally done it herself. I tried this at other stations. The result was that these people began accusing each other, which started a ridiculous prank war throughout the company. And it became painfully obvious I would make no headway here. I had to find the right person willing to listen. A word on being dead. I came to believe each soul's experience was determined by the whole of their parts. What you believed, what you've done or not done, your goals, lives touched, for better or worse, all serve to color and shape individual journeys after death. Basically, life and the afterlife are like school. Lessons to learn, challenges to overcome. Fail a grade and you're faced with doing it over again. So I wandered in search of the white light, or even the angel of death himself. But I found nothing, or at least thought I had. Nothing other than sardonic humor over the fact that inane reality shows were renewed for additional seasons while my own life had been canceled. That's what one tends to see if they roam through people's homes at night. Folks propped in front of gigantic TVs or staring without blinking at smartphones. I paused to pull blankets up around sleeping children, led animals to warm shelter that had been left out in the cold, and left behind small signs for the more aware folks to find and make gradual realizations that their lives could be a little more meaningful. I believed in magic, you see. I wanted the bells and whistles. I wanted to understand everything. I wanted to move on and meet whatever lay ahead for me. But it wasn't happening. The only conclusion I reached was that there was still an important task I was meant to accomplish. And the irony wasn't lost on me that indecision and self-doubt had played a large role in my life. I'd had a firm belief system, but where I myself fit in remained a mystery. And I had assumed answers would be revealed when I crossed over. Did I see other spirits? Yes and no. There were thousands, yet not many like me. Most were not actually spirits, but mere essence trapped in a time loop. Extreme emotions tend to leave powerful imprints. Some I saw were like half-visible jellyfish floating gracefully by. Many were intelligent, I believe, but did not communicate with me, which left me ill-equipped to form much of a hypothesis. There were indeed shadow people and other anomalies, but these seemed on a different plane. They didn't acknowledge me, or else vanished at once. When I did cross paths with a rare earthbound spirit like me, it was as if, still being newbies, we had not mastered the means to interact. And some are so consumed by emotional turmoil from the recent past that they have a resolute tunnel vision. Out of frustration, I visited famous ghost camps, Queen Mary, Willard Library, and the Paris Catacombs. Mooning those who can't visibly see you is not as satisfying as you might think. But the thought of ghost enthusiasts staring at their monitors in hope of witnessing a spirit was too good to resist. I was alone, as I had been in life. There were no children to watch over, no grieving partner to console. I had asked to be cremated, and that occurred. Afterward, I meandered down unfamiliar streets. It's funny what you miss. Having been a somewhat shy, reclusive person whose human interaction came mostly over the internet, I miss my pets. For more than 25 years, I had the pleasure to share my life with pet rats. They were little souls that embodied joy, burning brightly for a short time. They taught me much about love. When each one passed, it was devastating, but there was always another who came along and shared its unique, twinkling spirit. To explain that to people afraid of rats is an impossibility, but a soul is a soul. The deep bond I had developed with them was the treasure of my existence. The 2 rats I had left behind in my passing had been sweetly adopted, thankfully. But all of the others I had known over the years seemed so close now. I could almost feel them around me, yet I was somehow kept apart by a veil of time or space. It was a bittersweet realization. I felt like the hero in my favorite old Lord Dunsany tale, a fantasy story about seeking the dragon whose spine of unearthly steel could be forged into a magical sword that could cut through that which kept me from my purpose. Where is my dragon? I asked of the sky, but no answer came. If ever there was a wandering spirit blown by chance winds like a tuft of dandelion, it was I. The living were oblivious as I passed among them. Some, of course, are more sensitive than others. Now and then a perceptive face would stare in my direction or scan the room with curious eyes. And I understood how some spirits could lose touch and feel alienated. I found myself drawn to largely populated areas, strangely enough, where I could observe in anonymity. In time it did become a curse almost, constantly barraged by their thoughts, moods, and intentions. Psychic emotion is key, like a colorful prism of energy unique to each soul. That, combined with my honed ability to move or affect small objects, gave me the impetus to touch lives. I clung to the hope that this was the door through which I must pass. Whispering in a kind young man's ear at a crosswalk influenced him to grab an elderly woman's coat and pull her to safety. Manipulating the images of a digital billboard caught people's attention and pulled them away from a power line as it fell. At an enormous outdoor mall, I was certain my time had come. The place was beautifully landscaped with lush flowers and a waterfall. Folks in the immediate area were rushed, bustling to shopping or lunch destinations, but in good moods, with one exception. A bearded man in a black hoodie sat very still outside a jewelry store. Dark circles beneath his eyes hinted of turbulence. He smoldered with rage. His heart raced like a crack hamster on a wheel, and there was a gun hidden in his waistband. My connection to the astral plane was not established enough to know how many might have lost their lives or been injured that day. All it took on my part was a small, invisible nudge of a passing man to make him spill a drink on himself at the adjacent fast food court. Like a domino effect, those walking by swerved to avoid collision, moving close enough to the angry man to make him jump up, revealing the gun briefly to a plainclothes security guard. A silent call for backup and potential disaster was averted. And yet, Nothing changed. No angelic glowing door in the ether opened for me. I remained in isolation, stripped of the slightest joy to even taste a frappuccino or slice of pizza. I was about to move away from the mall when a sudden delicate wave of sadness hung in the air. It brought to my mind the image of a lost ant searching for its colony, so damnably relatable. Scanning the area, I determined that the emotion originated from a young boy. He was sitting in an ice cream parlor booth with his father. I felt no trace of abuse, but the mother had recently passed. In his own grief, the father had temporarily misplaced his capacity to give time and attention to his son, which was so desperately craved. I can't explain why, but my reaction was to make one of the boys' French fries dance. The laughter that bubbled out of him was contagious. My heart swelled. He knew something was up and glanced around the food court. He couldn't detect me, but smiled and nodded in my general direction. Distracted from his phone, the father raised an eyebrow to investigate. The boy laughed again as I flicked one of the tiny fry stubs left on his father's tray. It flew into a woman's hair in the next booth, and the boy convulsed with laughter. The father hadn't seen this action, but the heaviness in his soul melted away. It was like dark clouds moving away to reveal the sun as he laughed with his boy for the first time in months. Invisible tears streamed down my face. This was what my sweet rats had taught me. To cherish the joy of each moment with those we love. To let it shape the way we view and touch the world. My own heart's heaviness dissipated as I understood the gift I had been given. A cool breeze rustled the flowers behind me. The sound of small galloping feet triggered my smile as the dear faces and forms of my rats swarmed towards me, eyes shining with remembrance and love. I basked in that joy for a long while, calling each by name and snuggling. I was thrilled to see even the cat I had loved as a child, and a wonderful chameleon that had once had the run of my apartment. They were all with me now, as they truly always had been. They showed me my path, and we walked on together as they showered me with unconditional love. At the threshold of a great door stood a towering figure in a black mantled cloak. Powerful white wings, feathers tipped with vermilion and amethyst, swept gracefully up into the clouds. The staff of his glittering scythe was intricately carved with 1,000,000 faces. An iridescent shimmer of peace and enlightenment was mirrored in that blade. At first glance, his face was indeed a skull. It was the disguise fashioned by the fear of men for centuries, but the intense flame of his soul burned with pure compassion. I had been fascinated with death imagery as a child, and now I understood why. His purpose was not to frighten. He was not responsible for our exit, but to help us move on to the next phase of our journey. "I see you found your dragon," he said, raising an arm to usher me within. I smiled and nodded, rats nearly falling from my shoulders as I followed him inside.